Presence is not a promise to keep for every person in your story forever. Some people were only meant to be in a chapter and not the whole book. Knowing the difference is not a failure of love. It might be the most loving thing you do this season. Hi, friend. I'm Christina Ryan, a faith-based purpose and leadership coach, helping you uncover who you already are so you can live and lead with light on purpose. This is a bonus episode for our relationships phase of Summer on Purpose. Before we can talk about renewal and rest, we have to talk about the weight that some of us are still carrying. Relationships we haven't had the courage to close, or boundaries we haven't had the courage to set. If you stay with me today, you'll walk away with a clear way to hold presence and release together instead of treating them as opposites. You'll have one biblical example of two godly men parting ways without either of them being wrong, and a practical way to close a chapter without carrying bitterness into your next one. Are you ready? Let's get started. Here's the first key. Presence is not a promise. Being present with someone in a moment does not obligate you to keep that person in your story forever. We spent 4 weeks on relationships, making the case that people matter, that presence matters, that the words you speak either build up or drain, and all of that stands. None of it means every relationship is meant to last for the rest of your life, though. Ecclesiastes 3 says, "There's a time and a purpose for everything under heaven. A time to embrace, a time to avoid embracing." And I know that you probably have heard that at different things, but it's true about relationships. Some people were only assigned to us for a season, and when the season ends, staying doesn't prove your loyalty. It just delays what was already true. The confusion most of us carry is thinking that presence and permanence are the same commitment, and they're not. You can be fully present with someone at dinner tonight and still be discerning whether they belong in next year's chapter. Those things aren't in conflict. One is about how you show up today. The other is about what you're building your life around. So before you feel guilty about a relationship that's fading, will you ask yourself the real question? Is this a person I'm called to keep showing up for, or a person that I've been keeping out of guilt? See, knowing the difference is one thing. Actually releasing someone is another. And it usually comes with a fear that's worth naming directly. And that leads us to our second key, that release isn't rejection. Two godly people can walk away from each other and both still be walking with God. In Acts 15, Paul and Barnabas were preparing for their next mission trip, and they got into a sharp disagreement over whether to bring Mark along again. Mark had abandoned them on the last trip, and Scripture says it was a disagreement that was sharp enough that they parted company. Paul took Silas one direction, and Barnabas took Mark another. Here's what's easy to miss. Neither of them were disqualified for it. Paul kept planting churches, and Barnabas kept discipling Mark, who later became someone that Paul himself asked for by name. Their split wasn't a failure. It was actually what let both callings keep moving forward. And I want to give you a version of this that's a little less biblical history and more Tuesday afternoon. A few years ago, I went to HR and to my supervisor's supervisor. It wasn't just a little hallway aside where a vague comment made in a review. I said directly that a lack of leadership was hurting our team. And I knew when I said it that it was going to cost me something. And boy, did it. The weeks after were harder and not easier. And saying it out loud didn't fix the problem. It just meant I had to keep showing up inside it, knowing what I knew. And I stayed longer than I should have because leaving, well, it felt like losing an argument that I knew I was right about. It took me longer than I want to admit to realize that staying, it wasn't a stand. It was me refusing to let go of being right at the cost of what it was doing to me. And that chapter was never really about the job title. It was about a version of myself that I kept defending inside of it. And I couldn't release one without releasing the other. Closing that chapter didn't make me the villain of that story. It gave me back clarity to actually lead on my own terms, somewhere where I wasn't spending my energy fighting to be believed. The same release that cost Paul and Barnabas a partnership is what let them both keep building what they were building. Proverbs 4:23 says to guard your heart because everything you do flows from it. A boundary isn't a wall you build to keep people out. It's a guard you set so what flows out of you toward the people who are still in your story stays clear instead of resentful. Deciding to release someone is the internal work. What you actually do next is where most of us get stuck. And it brings us to our third key. You can close it without carrying it. How you end something matters as much as the decision to end it. Jesus gave his disciples a strange instruction in Matthew 10. When they entered a town that wouldn't receive them, he didn't tell them to argue their case or force reconciliation. He told them to shake the dust off their feet and move on. No drama, no campaign to be understood, just release and forward motion. That's the model. Closing a chapter well doesn't require the person to agree with your decision or apologize or even understand it. It requires you to stop carrying what was never yours to carry indefinitely and walk forward without dragging resentment into whatever's next. This connects directly to what we just spent 4 weeks building. You cannot be fully present with the people still in front of you while you're mentally re-litigating a relationship that ended 2 years ago. Every bit of energy that boundary protects is energy you get to actually give the person in your kitchen tonight. Releasing someone well usually looks undramatic. A conversation, if it's safe and warranted. Silence, it's not. Either way, the goal isn't to win the ending, it's to walk out with your hands open instead of clenched. Before we close this out, let's stop talking about it in general and make it specific to you. Let me ask you something that you just sit with for a second. Is there someone you're still carrying who was only ever meant for a chapter and not your whole book? You don't have to decide anything permanent right now. I just need you to be honest about what you're still holding. And here's a truth to carry out of this episode. Closing a chapter is not proof that you failed at love. It's sometimes the clearest evidence that you understood it. If you want to sit with that a little bit longer, this episode has its own reflection guide built specifically for this conversation. You are not required to keep every person from every season of your life in the current one. You haven't failed anyone by outgrowing a relationship that's run its course. Release what's asking to be released. Guard your heart while you do it, and give what's left of your light to the people still standing in front of you. That's not distance. That's what it looks like to turn your light fully on for whatever's next. Friend, if this episode named something that you've been carrying, like I said, I built the free reflection guide for it. It will help you get honest about who you're still holding and what closing that chapter could actually look like. You can grab it using the link below in the description. If this is bigger than one relationship, if you're realizing that you consistently struggle to know where your presence ends and where your obligations begin, that's exactly the kind of pattern the purpose factor assessment helps you name. I've linked it below as well. There's no challenge attached to this week's episode. And I just want you to write down the name of one person that you've been carrying past their chapter. You don't have to do anything with it today, but just stop pretending that you're not carrying it. Next week, we will step fully into renewal. It's rest and direction and turning your light on for the second half of this summer. Until then, I want you to live and lead from the light within.